Hello, and welcome back to the Shadows. This is, of course, the ETCH CAST. It's a new year here, 2026. And we're going to start the year off by looking back, way back, at the first film that I wrote and directed. It's called The Bleeding House. And I'm joined today by Will Battersby.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Who's going to talk about making it. I, of course, am Philip Gelatt. I'm a writer, director, producer, person who does things. This is my new stock introduction. Do you like it?
Solid. I too am a person.
Last time we checked. For now. Okay. So, Will, what is The Bleeding House? Let's just start with that, because I'm assuming that most people listening to this probably haven't seen it, or maybe have and have forgotten.
Yeah, or maybe worked on it. So The Bleeding House is the first movie that Phil and I worked on together, him as writer-director, me as producer. And it was based on an original script that Phil wrote that was originally called County Road K, which was a terrific title. But we can get to why the actual name of the movie changed, because it changed very late too. It was actually...
It had a couple of titles. I think it was also called Blackbird for a while. I think County Road K was the original title. But yeah,
yep.
Carry on.
Which we know Stephen King liked, because there was a copy of the script sitting around in his house when a friend of ours was working with him, and he saw the title and said, "Ooh, that's a great title." So I've been waiting for him to rip it off for 15 years, but he hasn't yet. So, but yeah, anyway, so it's a script that Phil and I had worked at various companies, independent production companies in New York together, but then he had gone off and decided he wanted to be a writer and sent me and my then producing partner, Tori Tennell, the script for County Road K, and we loved it and wanted to produce it, and we hadn't even thought about you, Phil, as a director at that point, and I don't think you had really thought about you as a director at that point, at least not openly, and so we went out
not even in a hidden part of myself. No.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I opened that Pandora's box. Sorry, world. But yeah. So we went out and actually attached a guy to direct it who had made, I think 1 or 2 features, but we couldn't raise the money to get it made. And then I was having lunch with you, Phil. If you remember, we were in Hell's Kitchen in New York, and I said the phrase that shall live in infamy: "If I can raise a couple of $100,000 to make this, do you want to direct it?" And Phil said, "Yeah, okay." And the rest is history.
I think you also maybe said, "How hard could it be? It's not rocket science," which is a thing that continually rattles around in my brain.
I say that a lot. It's just cut and paste. It'll be...
We're not...
I mean, what could go wrong?
A man to a moon here. To the moon here. A moon, any moon.
Just sending 50 people into the woods in a remote part of New Jersey to hate me for all time. Yeah, and so, and again, I think that's sort of part of the filmmaking journey, right? So I had come from the kind of executive track. I'd worked in production at the BBC in England, but then I'd worked at a big agency here representing writers and directors. And, Phil had gone, you went to NYU, but not in the production track, right?
No, I was a cinema studies student. So I had, as I like to say, sat around and watched a lot of movies and read a lot of theory that nobody cares about it is ultimately completely useless. Fun, but useless.
Yeah. So, and I think kind of foolhardiness, shall we say, is maybe the bedfellow of initial creativity, that you have to be a little bit foolish to embark on a creative lifestyle, I think. And we discovered that pretty quickly.
There's a less gentle way that this is going to be a podcast full of Will Battersby production quotes, which is like, either you're on the crazy bus or you're not on the crazy bus, which is a different way of saying the same thing, which is like, often when we're heading into a production, I'm like, oh, well, here's the moment. Like, either we're all getting on this bus and we're hitting the gas, or we're all saying, I'll take the next one. Like, this one's not for me.
Yeah, and that's I'd forgotten that, and that phrase was born, I think, on the set of The Bleeding House, as I was complaining about somebody who was not on the crazy bus with us. But and I think that's again, look, it's a great kind of motto, and everyone will figure their own out as you're kind of embarking as young filmmakers. Is to really realize who are your companions on the journey, and it's not, you shouldn't always see eye to eye with those people, but you should always be inspired by them and excited by them. And I think you and I realized pretty early on we had the same kind of madness, the same. You have very different specific obsessions, and so do I. But I think they kind of coalesce around the same ambition. To make entertaining, crazy shit and learn things and kind of, have fun along the way.
Yeah, have fun, and then what's the opposite of fun? Along the way too. I mean, it's a little bit of both. It's always.
I think we've both cried during productions, and that's okay. Yes, you do have to. It's true. But anyway, so the Bleeding House. So I managed quite quickly to raise that money, and we embarked on prep. And I think he's probably raised it 19 times on this podcast before. But one of the first things Tori and I did is make Phil change the script.
Well, but that was prior to that. Those script changes. So for those who haven't seen it, the movie as it exists is a sort of home invasion-ish horror film where a mysterious stranger comes to a house where there's a secret in the house. There's some event in the past has caused the family to be sort of ostracized from the town around them. And so they're like, lonely and in a bad place. And the stranger comes and, bad things happen. He turns out he knows their secret and he's there to murder them. And then the secret gets revealed and it sort of has a kind of reversal effect on the story. And like that structure, what I just laid out, that was always the structure of the movie. Really, what changed was what is the secret in the house, and what is the third act of the film. And then there's one other thing I'll talk about in a second. So in the original conception, the secret in the house was that the young girl could raise the dead, but she was not in control of that ability. So what had happened in the past was there had been a funeral or something, and then all the bodies in the funeral had come back to life, and and the mom, trying to hide the secret, had burned the funeral home down, and then been like, my daughter can't be around anything that's dead. And so that was a part of it too. It wasn't just human bodies; it was anything that was dead. So it was like animals, insects, notably, like it was anything. So she needed to be secluded from from death, basically. Otherwise, she would undo it, and she couldn't control it. So what we had in that first version was kind of like a slasher film that then suddenly, to the surprise and delight of the audience, flipped into a zombie film in the sort of midpoint-ish to the third act. The other thing that I had done that I've probably talked about on the podcast before, which I understand why I did it, and I still think it's the right instinct, although I understand why we took it out, was, when you write your first script, and this was the first script I wrote to completion, you kind of just take everything you love and you just cram it in a box and see what, then you open the box and you're like, oh, look what I have here. So the other thing that was going on in that script was that it was like vaguely science fictional. Do you remember this? So it was set in an America that was completely torn apart. Yeah. So it was that like, and you couldn't, I mean, it's a still thing I do. It's a thing that's sort of in the script that we're going to make later this year. Like that idea that the world is not what you think it is very much off screen, but you see sort of like indications of it on screen, right? So at a certain point, the police arrive. That still happens in the movie. In the movie, they roll up in the cheapest cop car we could rent. In the original script, they roll up in like a tank, because it's like this, it's very apropos from where we are now, but it's like this, the country is like, has been torn apart for reasons we never explain. The police are heavily militarized, and there's like some sort of horrible ongoing event that that's like, 1,000 miles away, but it is informing what's happening on top of the serial killer, the slasher, and on top of the zombies. I still think it sounds like a great movie. I understand. But so anyway, we developed that version of it for a while, but then I think even before we attached the other director, we had taken that stuff out. And at that point, it was just like we took out I can't remember which one first, the zombies or the sci-fi stuff. Anyway, they both ended up pulled out. So we ended up with just what I laid out at the beginning, which is, like a home invasion film with sort of a like family drama at its heart. But I mean, done for obvious reasons, like, you know, it's way more expensive to make a sci-fi zombie film than it is to make a slasher film.
Yeah, and easier when we went to my local sheriff's department to ask to borrow a police car. Easier to ask to borrow a police car than a tank.
You could maybe get a tank now, though. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. We should maybe Johnny Roquet is the next movie we should make. We can visit. So sorry, I completely derailed where we were just by talking about the differences in the script. Well, I guess the point really is that it was about like scope reduction to try to get to a place where we could do a version of it for the money that we had.
And that's when we brought in our brilliant, crazy Egyptian line producer, Per Melita, because, you know, I had not ever produced a movie before. And, you know, I mean, kind of a lot of it's slightly intuitive, you know, in terms of kind of running a budget and keeping to it and all those things. But I had no idea like how we would hire the crew and, you know, any of those things. So Per, we'd worked with at HDNet Films, the Mark Cuban's company that I'd worked at before. And he agreed to come in and got on the crazy bus with us. Wholeheartedly got on the crazy bus.
I think he lives on a crazy bus, Per. I haven't talked to him in a while, but my impression is that his whole life is just like you sometimes you meet people like that in production who's like, that's all they do. So they really, like, they see a normal bus, so they're like, that's the crazy bus. I'm never going to get on that bus.
Yeah, and it's a very specific kind of person that just adores like low budget independent production. And there are aspects to it that I absolutely love too. The kind of camaraderie in the madness is great, but wow, it's an exhausting process, as we discovered on this movie.
Yeah, indeed. So then let's think about this. So we brought Per on first, and then you know, you have to sort of get your other key crew, you know, like your director of photography and your production designer and editor and etc. All of which we have things to say about. Let's talk about the director of photography first. We saw a bunch of people, and then we met a man named Frederick Fasano, who is Italian, but what is he by birth?
Danish.
That's right. Yeah. And he had shot a number of Argento films, like sort of what I would describe as, even back then, late period Argento films. So like experienced with like an amazing, you know, one of the greatest horror directors of all time, or arguably the greatest horror director of all time, depending on your perspective, I guess. And he read the script, was really into it, and he just sort of seemed like the obvious choice based on the level of experience and sort of the pedigree there. And Freddie is great. I mean, was certain, and it was his first American film, correct? Like he'd never shot anything in America before, which led to all kinds of interesting culture clashes, specifically between him and Per, because Freddie had never encountered an American line producer before and was not into it.
Yeah, it's production in Europe is very, very different. It's not quite as grueling, and there's a kind of that sort of socialist underpinning as there is in so much of Europe, that, you know, you're not going to do 14-hour days, and, you know, and yeah, Freddie and Per, and Freddie and the first AD.
But actually, my recollection, it was the opposite. Was their conflict was that Freddie was being told, "You're going to have to stop shooting at 12 hours," and he was like, "Why?"
Really?
That's my recollection, because we were trying to get quite a long take of one of the characters walking through the house, and our AD, who's really sort of in charge of the schedule, was trying to like tell us we needed to stop, and Freddie was like, "Why? We haven't gotten the shot yet." And then Per gave him an earful, and Freddie was like, "This is not how we do it in Europe. Like in Europe, you finish the shot and then you're done."
I think it depends what kind of Europe. Depends who you're working with. Probably Argento is like, "No, I'm going to get my shot. You're all going to stay here until it's done." But that's funny. And actually, that sounds exactly like Freddie, because we've worked with him on a lot of features and shows since then. And yeah, he'll work all night.
yeah, if you let it. Yeah.
And we made that's the first production which we made one of our fateful discoveries about horror films, which are all written to take place at night. And so we were just like, oh, we're just going to shoot. How long was the shoot? Was it 3 weeks or 4 weeks? I don't remember.
I was less than that. I think it was definitely not 4. I think it was 3.
3. Like 18 days or something, probably.
Yeah, I wonder if it wasn't even a 2. Is it possible it was 2?
No, because it must have been longer, because we wouldn't have been that dead at the end of it had it been 2. But yeah, because of course, you quickly realize then you have to shoot nights. And so, you're doing 12-hour days, as it were, but, you're starting just before dark and you're ending just before sunrise. And that takes a toll on the human body and mind.
Yeah. So okay. To that point, I guess we'll talk about the other department heads in a second. So where were we shooting? Sorry, you got.
Well, again, I was like, oh, this is one of my qualities that gets things done, but sometimes leads us into difficulty, is how hard can that job be? So I said, we don't need a locations manager. I'll find the location. Yeah, it's just cut and paste. So it was kind of the early days of Google Maps, and I sat for hours and hours, kind of looking all around the kind of tri-state area and kind of trying to figure out, because the house had to be remote. So, you had to be able to see 360 and not see other houses, which you quickly realize is quite hard in the tri-state area. So Long Island was struck off very quickly. I didn't really know Connecticut that well, but I had moved to
We saw one house in Connecticut. Do you remember? We drove up and saw
That's
one
right.
house. Yeah, but it was too small and it was too far away. And even on top of that, I remember us discussing how, like, if we had to take 95 north every day to get there, it was going to kill us. Yeah. So we, for many reasons, didn't.
Yeah. And plus also, if you're traveling your crew out of New York City, technically, they should really be on the clock during that travel time. It becomes very murky too, all of that stuff, particularly on low budget things. But we'll get to the lessons and why there are unions and why they are a good thing later. So I ended up finding basically an empty giant house in New Jersey in a place called Green Village, which was even far away from my house and was really not as close to the city as I kept telling myself. And the crazy owner, they were about to tear it down, but they agreed to leave it up for us to shoot in.
I think, yes, but I think this was just post real estate crash. So I think they had, because you remember there was a piece of construction.
Oh, right next door to it. Yes, that's right.
So I think that they were going to tear it down, but I'm not sure. Well, maybe they paused for us, but I feel like they just didn't have any money. So it was just sitting there waiting for them to like figure out what to do.
Yeah.
So one of the two.
Which was great because, of course, one of the things about locations is, you think, oh, great, we're going to go into this place. You find the place, but it's a mistake that young producers make a lot, which is they don't really prime the owners of those locations for what's going to happen. So, when you're moving 30, 40, 50, 80 people into a space, you need to make all the changes you're going to make to it. It can often be very, very destructive, very damaging. You're moving vast amounts of equipment, lighting stands, metal, you're laying down metal track, but the great thing about that location was they didn't care what happened to it because they knew they were going to knock it down eventually. The only problem with it is that they turned the water and heat off.
Indeed, there was no heat in that house.
Yeah, and we were shooting in late fall.
Yep.
But again, what could go wrong?
Right. So my specific memory, I'm sure is that at a certain point we had to bring in space heaters, but they looked like, pardon the usage of the term, they looked like hobo trash cans. Do you remember this? My recollection is that in the foyer of that house, there was like a big metal drum that just had a fire in it. That's not really what it was, but it was.
It's not far off. Yes. So I used to show up 2 hours before the crew call, because I lived in Jersey and everyone else was coming from Brooklyn. So I used to show up. Yes, I still have it out in my shed. Giant, like it was an old version of a construction heater, a round thing, exactly say a hobo trash can. And I used to attach a propane tank to it, and you can't run them inside while people are there. So I just used to turn it on and like run out of the house and leave it on for an hour and just try and get the temperature up a little bit. And then in the actors' dressing rooms, we had little like individual space heaters to keep the stars warm.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was a big, I mean, so I guess to talk a little bit more about the set, like, it worked for our purposes mostly. And there were a few problems, it was too big a house. I remember a Freddie quote. It's like, we cannot see this whole house. Nobody feels sad for rich people because the house was big. So if you saw the whole house, you'd be like, oh, these people live in a mansion. And it wasn't like, if on the list of like creative sacrifices that get made just to make the film at the budget that we could make it at, like as written, it's a farmhouse. And, you'll watch somebody like, that's not a farmhouse. There's no farm there at all. So there's that. The house was, so we only shot it from certain angles, so you couldn't see that it was actually massive. And then we, get in the context of the film, you really only see, I guess you see the upstairs, maybe like 2 rooms of the upstairs, and there were probably like 10 rooms up there. Like there was a whole rabbit warren.
We just ignored one side of the house. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And it had no power, no heat, so we had to figure out how to get the power on. I remember that being the whole thing. Yeah.
And no running water.
Oh, that's right. Did we get the water turned on? No, we must not have. No.
Nope. So we had to bring in our honey wagon and all the loos and sinks and yes. So again, it's one of those funny things where, as an inexperienced producer, I mean, luckily I had Pear, but Phil and I were kind of doing a lot of this just kind of by ourselves. And so I was like, oh, well, great. We found a house. Perfect. And you don't really think about the actual logistical nightmare of being there in October. If it gets really cold, there's no heat, there's no water. You're in the middle of nowhere. Who's going to clean the porta johns? And it just, and that's the sort of the very glamorous side of producing it, and that's physical production, right? You've got a ton of bodies and, you're responsible for them.
Yeah. And then, of course, it was also, there's a couple of things I could pick on there, but like, I guess to bring it back to like, key creative crew. I mean, the house was abandoned, right? So it had nothing in it. So we'd hired a production designer who was also inexperienced, but came, recommended. But it was, I think both in terms of budget and time and ability, just way more than that our department could handle. So, so because it's an empty house, but it has to look like a family lives in it, that means you have to find all the furniture, and then you want the furniture to like have a specific sort of look to it, which, to be clear, in Bleeding House was simply not possible. It was like, oh, is that a couch? Great, that's our couch. We're moving into the house. Like there was no ability to like make sort of choices, really. And then, I mean, and then on top of that, there was like so that's like challenge 1 is like, does this look like a house? Challenge 2 is like, well, it's supposed to be a moody sort of dark horror movie, and that the daughter in the movie is supposed to be, like a weird, violent teen. So there's that's a particular design sense that you have to get right. That was just completely not possible for for a production designer to figure out how to do, and not like we didn't have the time really for me to like, get in there with her and figure out how to do it myself. So that just like, there's just this trickle down effect. So what you end up with, well, then, I mean, there are very specific things in the design of that film that are just egregious. I won't go into them, but if you look at the corners of that movie, if you watch it, you want to be like look at the living room of that movie very, very carefully, and you'll notice some really, really perplexing design choices. So what it does, though, I guess the lesson there really is like, if you don't have any money, you need to be very, very careful about what kind of production design you're looking for and what the ask is, and then also where you put the camera, right? Because as soon as a room isn't production designed, completely, or only a part of it is, it has this effect also on where you can aim the camera, because you can't aim the camera at something that looks like garbage, right? Because you just don't want to, right? Um, so we ended up in a lot of those sorts of circumstances, or where you'll be sitting on the day you're shooting, and it's like, you're looking at the monitor with the DP, and you're trying to you're just suddenly seeing all of the stuff in the corners, where you're like, well, I don't want to see that, and I don't want to see that, and I don't want to see that. Like, what can we do about this problem? And on a movie like Bleeding House, the answer generally is basically nothing. Like move the camera slightly, maybe, but then you move it and you're like, well, I don't want to see that, and I don't want to see that. So you end up in it boxes you in a way that is, tricky. And I didn't know to prepare for that, really, because I've never done it before. So I was like, oh, I see. Like, I understand now what the problem is. Yeah. Um, yeah. I'm wondering, do you have other art department thoughts, memories,
Uh,
pleasant memories?
oh, well, I remember the day before we started, and we were going to start in the basement where the brother, played by the wonderful Charlie Hewson, and his girlfriend, the brilliant Nina Lee Sandrello, were like listening to music and making out. And we'd chosen the room in the basement, and we were like, great, like that's going to be the room. And we walked in there, we were like, hey, art department, there's supposed to be a wall here. Remember that? And there wasn't. And they were like, we don't know how to put up a wall. So I do remember driving to Home Depot. Well, maybe you came with me.
No, I don't think I came. I knew it was happening, because they also didn't have a
Yeah.
bed. You recall this? It was also like there was no wall. There was basically no room. There was no
Yeah.
bed. There was no wall. They luckily found a bed in the, because this house also had a pool, right? I think they found like a
Yes.
dirty old mattress in the pool house.
Yeah. I went to Home Depot and got a bunch of 2x4s and plywood and built a wall. Yeah. So that's the day. And again, listen, lessons learned, right? That's not how you should spend your last day of prep as the producer of the movie, right? You should be having a full read through with all the heads of department sitting around. So you walk through the entire script, right? So everybody knows exactly what's happening, and you've got the full, schedule in front of you. So you walk through it kind of in order. Everybody knows what's expected of them for each scene. Everybody knows that they've done their job. And we did not have that luxury on this. Again, lessons learned. But I think, we did end up, we had a tiny crew as well. But luckily, Freddie had brought his crazy Italian gaffer, Nicola Guarnieri,
Yep.
Who is now key grip on like all the Spider-Man movies and all sorts of crazy stuff. But he was fantastic. And Freddie and Nicola saved us. Who was the costume designer? I can't remember. Do you remember?
I don't remember her name, unfortunately.
No, but she was very good, I thought, and did a lot. And we had great actors. That's the other thing we didn't have a casting director. That was the first time I uttered the immortal phrase, like, oh, I can be the casting director as well, right? But look at that star cast. Patrick Breen.
How did we end up with Patrick Breen? How did that happen?
I must have known his agent from my agency days. And we were all obviously huge fans. Betsy Adam.
Yep.
Great theatre actress. Alexandra Chando, who played our lead, who was fantastic. And she'd been in a big TV show, hadn't she, on the CW before doing our movie?
No, that was after.
Oh, it was after. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
all right.
Yep.
And who
Richard
else?
Beacons.
Oh, Richard Beacons. Yeah, he was great as the dad. Yep.
Yeah, it was a fine cast. There are things that worked really well in the movie, I think. So I haven't watched all the way through since we locked picture. That's the other thing I should talk about, is we had an editor. We had one editor who we fired before he did anything, because I thought that he was going to be. I should remember this. We had one, and he never cut anything. Maybe should have stuck with him. I'm not sure. Then we had another one, and I found him. He was fine, but also I don't know how this happened. I'd never used Final Cut before. I never cut anything. To just use this podcast to confess my complete ignorance of all parts of the the filmmaking process. And so we had an editor, and he was cutting and cutting, and we sort of thought we were getting pretty close to a final cut. And he had like, remember, he knew these composers who like worked with U2 or something. So we like took a cut to like watch with them. And I remember, I think it was there. This is my recollection is I remember watching that cut of it and thinking, I don't think that this is cut properly, because I was noticing stuff where it's like, oh, like, you know, like an actor you'd see a shot and the actor would do this, and then we'd cut to another angle and that action would be repeated. And it wasn't like it was the center of the shot, but like if you were really looking at it, I was like, this is like, there are, aside from creative concerns, I feel like there are weirdnesses here that shouldn't be in here if we're showing it to like people who are going to maybe do this. And so it was around that time that I said to Will, hey, I think I can cut this myself. I think I can figure out how to do this final cut, because how hard could it be? It's not rocket science. So we we moved the edit station into my house, or my apartment at the time. I was living in Brooklyn. And we just did that. I was like, we fired the editor. I was like, I'm going to edit it now, with my friend Tom Bain, who's great, who had used Final Cut. So he was useful. And I just sort of like learned the software, and did it that way, which I think was to the benefit of the film. Like, I probably still have the last cut we did with the editor. I'm quite convinced that mine would be better. But that was definitely like another moment where I was like, oh, we're just going to do this. We're just going to do it this way.
But I think, again, one of the great things, for me, I very much think about the Bleeding House as kind of like my film school. I was older, and, but I studied French in college, and then, worked at a big agency. Like, what did I actually know about making stuff? And I think, and that's really where we learned, what all the jobs are, what's so essential about most of those jobs, and also how exciting it is when you find somebody that's very good at those jobs, and I think we kind of, and you have to work with your fair share of people who aren't very good at those jobs, but you also sometimes get incredibly lucky. I mean, if you think of Gillian, our sound mixer on that, and I remember kind of Pear brought her in to be, and I don't think you were even in that interview, and we interviewed her, and I was like, she's great, like super smart, great. And we made the deal with her, and it was, I think the whole crew was getting $100 a day.
Really that, yeah.
Which, it was crazy. But and then the first day on set, I was just kind of having a cup of coffee, and I was talking to Gillian, and I was like, oh, yeah, so, like what, and I can't believe I didn't even ask this in the interview. I was like, so, what was the last thing you worked on? And she was like, well, I just graduated college like 3 months ago. And I was like, oh, shit. But she turned out to be one of the biggest sound mixers in the tri-state area. She went on to incredible stuff. I mean, she's since retired out of production because, again, she was like, this is crazy. And she works in publishing now. But, she was such a talent. And that, and those kind of jobs, when they go wrong on set, you can find yourself in really hot water.
Yeah, completely. I mean, she was great. This now just remembering this whole part of the post-production process that I completely forgot about, which is that we also have a sound designer, like our post-sound person, who was a pair hire. Do you remember this guy? And we went into the mix, and our mixer, who was a very talented, like big level sound mixer, was like, do you remember this? He took us out of the room and he was like, your sound mix isn't done. Like, this is like, it's bad. Like, this is very bad. I can't mix this. It's not done. So we had to fire that sound designer and bring in other people to actually like do a proper sound design on it. Cause there was like, all this stuff you never think about. Like there was no, it's such a weird thing. I can't remember exactly what they call it, but like there, whenever you're listening to anything, even if there's no sound, there actually is sound there. There's like, and even if it's not like further distance, there are like layers of room tone and layers of silences that are sort of like recorded silences that make a space feel alive. And I think specifically was what was happening as he was mixing it, was he was like looking for things, like very, very subtle things to bring up or down to help the movie feel, alive, like it was an actual thing, and there just was nothing there. Like, it was literally nothing there. Just like, this is like unacceptable by any professional standard. Like, we can't, like, there's nothing for me to mix here. It's terrible. So
well, it's the first great kind of smoothing thing I mean, that was, again, such a kind of steep learning curve for me too, is that, because you're shooting, the reverses of shots and widers and close-ups at different times of day. So the actual ambient sound changes, right? And like what you can hear in the distance changes. And if you cut between those and you don't smooth that tone out and you don't kind of, find a kind of, a real unity in that tone, you don't necessarily always know why, but as a viewer, you start to become very bothered by it. And that, I remember that's what was happening. And there was all sorts of missing Foley, so like people would like put a glass down and there would be no sound. And I remember Tom like looking for it and be like, but it's just not there. So it's like, it's just an empty world.
And then, so actually, we should say this. The person that we hired who went on to be the most famous and most successful person is actually Hildur Guðnadóttir, who is a cellist, an Icelandic cellist and composer who has gone on to win Oscars, one Oscar at least. And so, she did the music. I think we were her first soundtrack. But I just remember the original sound designer who we fired commenting on her work negatively. And I was like, oh yeah, like you need to, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like you need to go. Yeah. Anyway, her score is great. I mean, it's an odd score for the type of movie. I mean, there are a lot of things that are odd about the movie, but I like it. I mean, like they're the oddnesses that we put there. So I like them about it. But yeah, Hildur was great. I've not spoken to her, obviously in probably like 20 years at this point.
She was fabulous because you went to Berlin to record that with her, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. So we were trying to figure out what music to use. And it was actually my wife, Vicky's suggestion, because we'd been listening to Hildur's second album, maybe. And she's like, oh, maybe something like this. So we sort of used it as temp. And then I said to you, what about something like this? And you're like, oh, this is great. Let's just see if we can get this woman to do it. So then you like reach
How hard can it be?
How hard can it be? It's not rocket science. So you went through her record label, I guess.
Her record label in London, yeah.
She was like, yeah, great. I'd love to. So I went to Berlin, and actually that was fascinating too. Actually sort of instructive to watch her work, both in terms of editing and sound design, because she would compose, she would just play the cello like individual notes, record them, and then take those sound files and compose like sort of non-linearly, which theoretically I guess I sort of understood about sound design for that, but it was interesting to watch her do it because it was so like the fusion of tech and creation and just sort of like a just a different way of working. But yeah, she was awesome.
Yeah, she's happy. She did the Chernobyl score, didn't she? I think she.
Yeah, and I think
she won the Emmy for that.
Yeah, and for Joker or something too. Like she's won. Yeah. She has an Oscar certainly because. I mean, she's so fancy. I don't think it's still there, but if you go to Los Angeles and you go to the Academy Museum, so like the new museum or new 5 years ago, they had a room there, which I think they will use for other composers. But both times I've been there, it's like a room that's like almost totally dark with one red light in it, and it just has like a great sound system, and you could just go in and listen to Hildur's music. And I was like, and like outside of it is like, here are props from Star Wars, and here's Tim Burton sets, and then like here's this room for Hildur's cello music. It's awesome.
Yeah,
the Bleeding House soundtrack is not part of that display, just to be clear.
But it's a great score.
It is a great score. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's there's certain aspects of the film where you're just like, oh yeah, like it just sort of in a different kind of stratosphere, and I think that's one of them. Opening, I will also say, I think if you watch the opening credit sequence, that too is very prescient. That was a friend of Tori's who designed that for us, if you remember.
Yep.
And that, I mean, every television show you've seen in the last 10 years, the opening of it essentially is like that. But that was very kind of groundbreaking at the time. I remember when he created that opening sequence for us, and quite beautiful and odd.
Yeah. With some great Hildur, I think it's a piano theme under there, I think. Anyway.
Yep. Yeah. And I will say the other great connection we made on that was Jeremy Sullenfriend. So again, Phil, we couldn't get Phil to cut all of the expensive violence out, because also, it's a horror film. So, and we wanted to do it all practically. So I searched around and found this little company called Monster in My Closet, run by this lovely lunatic called Jeremy Sellenfriend, who came and did all of our practical special effects, makeup and effects. And I mean, and they're all fantastic. I mean, there are shootings, there's like knife slashings, there's all sorts of good stuff.
Yep. Although I will say, there's no knock on Jeremy. I mean, so the last time I watched the movie, through, as I was starting to say before, was when we picture locked. So, a long time ago. But then a bar here in Providence was playing it, and they're like, "Oh, you should come." So I came and sat through the first 45 minutes, and for about 40 of those minutes, I was like, "Oh, you know what? This isn't bad." Like I'm pretty, as like a sort of tense family drama. It was working, but then as soon as it needed to shift into a horror film, I was like, "Oh, this doesn't work." Like this is like just doesn't work. And I think I probably would have continued to feel that way. I mean, my recollection is that I'm still very, very, very fond of the very end of the film. I think is quite good. But I think what I could feel there was like, oh, all of the stuff we're talking about, which is like we just didn't have enough time, like to build the suspense and the payoff of a horror movie or even like a sort of elevated thriller movie. It takes quite a lot of time of prep, which we just had, we didn't have the money to do, and I was so inexperienced, I didn't really understand how to do it. So it's like, basically, as soon as you remember the part where Patrick Breen hits the dad with the hammer, I think I watched for about 5 minutes after that before I was like, oh, I'm out of here. I will say there's one other part that I didn't get to when I was rewatching it that I think I would probably still like. There's Patrick Breen's character has a number of monologues, which I remember liking, and there's one that he gives sort of in the living room. You can see the production design parts in the shot that suck, but his performance is very good, and I remember being quite happy with that. And then the end, which isn't to say that people shouldn't go watch it, because it is on Tubi, the only streaming service you need. You can go watch it right now.
You can rent it on Prime too if people aren't boycotting.
Prime, what's that? Watch it on
okay, fine. Okay, go stream it on Tubi.
When was the last time you watched it? Do you have what? Do you have recollections of rewatching? No.
It was honestly probably in post, because if you remember, we were on our way to the LA premiere of that film and my wife went into labor. So I think I dropped you on the side of the road in LA on Sunset Boulevard, and I was like, I have to go to the airport, right? That was the Bleeding House.
Did you sit through it because the film played at Tribeca, the Tribeca Film Festival. Did you watch? You must have watched it there. Did you watch? You must have. Or did you leave? I did not watch it there. I
actually think we left and we went across the road to that little bar where we ended up having the party. Yeah. No, I'm trying to think though. I'm going to rewatch it because, there's always a moment in everything I produce where I have to close my eyes for 10 seconds because I'm full of remorse and regret and self-hatred for that moment where I was like, oh, how hard could it be? And I'm like, God damn it. But I can't remember for the life of me what it is in the Bleeding House, if anything, where I do that. I think it's, it's one of the great lessons. I think, your obsession with Robert Altman always reminds me of this, right. Which, you've got to make things. Like if you're creative, you have to make things. You can sit around and talk about it endlessly, right? And I think it's one of the hallmarks of kind of us as creators and producers, which is like very much kind of, there comes a point where you must execute. You have to do the thing you're talking about doing, and and you just have to, and you have to make mistakes to get better at that process. So that when you get to that moment of execution, it's so much better. And I think that some of our moments of execution on that film were terrific. Some of the hires were terrific. Some of the shots are amazing. Some of the performances, the writing is actually fantastic in that film. And yes, there are moments, I'm sure, where we fell down a little. But
here's a piece of advice: don't write a movie with a live animal in it ever. I did not learn that lesson on Bleeding House. I did it again in They Remain. In fact, I put more in They Remain, and we had to cut a bunch out.
Yeah.
There's a part in the Bleeding House, which I guess I didn't mind it when I saw it in the bar. Maybe I was sunk in my beer at that point, where there's a live bird in the. Do you remember?
That's a fantastic moment. The reanimation of the bird.
Well, but that's not what happens. Like the reanimation of the bird was in the original script. In the movie, she's just captured a live bird that escapes.
Oh, sorry, but sorry. spoiler, but she kills the bird,
She killed.
which is
Yeah.
great.
No, my point is, if you look at how it's cut, you'll know. Like you remember how hard. Like if okay, so this is the lesson. If you put a live bird in a house, it's not going to fly around. It's going to go to a high point and it's going to sit there. So the scene is a bird escapes from a trap and it flies around a room. And it took, I mean, I just remember like I wasn't allowed to go in the room, or it just didn't make sense for me to actually go in the room with the bird. So in the room with the bird was just Freddie and maybe the bird's handler or something. And I was like in the room we used as the dad's office, I think by myself with the monitor, just like, I literally, I remember just like this. Like, and like Freddie desperately trying to get anything. Like, so I think as cut, if I recall, it's like, yeah, we definitely see it perched on something. And I think we managed to catch it going through frame maybe twice. It is not,
It's all you need. It's the magic of cinema.
I guess it's all you need.
I think it was the end of that movie, right, where we looked at each other and we were like, okay, next movie is going to be silent, no dialogue, all during the day, and on a beach, like in a warm place with no actors.
No actors, no dialogue.
Yeah.
Which I guess.
So I think we just pitched the early days of ASMR. Just this, yeah. We were so kind of tired and cold at the end of that, but it was fun. We learned a lot.
All the lessons one doesn't learn. Like I definitely didn't learn don't put animals in things. I guess I've learned that now. I also didn't learn to dress properly. I think that's a common director thing, though. I heard like crew commented. So Bleeding House freezing. I was never dressed properly, and it was so cold and so windy. Our lights kept blowing over. Do you remember this? We were trying to get shots outside, and like the wind would just blow these giant lights down. And then they remained the same thing. Like I never had my jacket. I was never dressed properly. We also shot that in October in the cold.
Yeah, we did not learn our lessons. But that's the problem when you're making horror, right? You realize you're going to have nights, you're going to have cold, you're going to have exteriors.
What's scarier than daylight, though? That's my suspicion. My new theory.
Oh, I love that. On a beach somewhere with no actors. Sounds great. But my favorite thing is, and we'll let everybody decide what lessons we've really learned or not, is that the movie we're shooting later this year, which we've got all sorts of exciting announcements about coming up, but not on this episode, where I was just like, just write it in one location. And the beautiful thing about it is it will be the most expensive thing we've ever made.
Yeah, wait a minute.
with the most special effects, like the most complicated sequences, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, I guess no comment. Yeah. Other lessons? Do we have other lessons? Other interesting things to talk about? I don't think so.
Not that were going to be very interesting to the general public. I mean, we can talk about an Italian man discovering what do they call pork and beans for the first time?
Yeah, sorry, we should talk about the catering because the catering is an enjoyable story, and then we can call it after that. You can tell it.
You tell it better. Go on.
Well, I don't even. So to Will's point, like when you produce a movie, you're suddenly responsible for like a mini, not an army in this case, but like a bunch of people. So you have to get food and catering. So we hired this guy whose name was Joe. I can't remember his last name because we ended up with 3 Joes on set. One of whom has been on this podcast, but not this one. This Joe was the caterer, and so we would do. It sucked. Like we were coming from New York City every morning and trying to get to Jersey. So we would get picked up. I would get picked up on Canal Street and like 6th Avenue at like when I started shooting nights. I get picked up at 4 p.m. and get into like a passenger bus with the crew. We would then drive 45 minutes out into the boonies of New Jersey to be fed breakfast. When you get there, there's breakfast, like a hot breakfast. But our caterer, who was, I think, just like sleeping in his car on set, was just catering from from Costco.
Costco.
From Costco. Yep. And he was clearly just buying like vats of like mini hot dogs in like, like hot dog sauce and serving them as breakfast. It was like you could get your like, Freddie would call it sausage soup. You could get your sausage soup for breakfast before working your 12 to 14-hour day from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Yes, I one of my hallmarks as a producer, and Freddie actually makes fun of me now, is he's like, oh, on every job with Will since then, we eat like kings, because I'm like, okay, I'm never going to do that to anyone ever again. So I think on your second movie, They Remain, it was avocado toast every morning for everybody, because you realize.
That lovely place catered it that was like somewhere up there in Salem. Remember they did?
Oh, those women were amazing. What was it? Something to do with ducks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But they were fantastic. But that's also, again, one of the lessons for me, and I think we leaned into this a little bit harder on They Remain, Phil's second movie, is really to use local resources and look around, right? Because catering is, doesn't have to be movie catering, right? It just needs to be people who can cook. And those dinners were great. And they were so sensitive to everyone's allergies. And, Che Broadnax, we're looking at you, our AC, who has every allergy known to men.
No human being's allergic to sausage soup. I mean, you might not want to eat it, but you're not going to be like...
It's true. We maybe should develop allergies to sausage soup. But yes, but Freddie, I loved Freddie. Freddie didn't speak English very well, and I remember doing the deal with him when we first hired him. And he'd been on like fair, big-ish kind of European movies, and and I was like, look, this is really going to be bare bones. And he was slowly realizing, as Per and I were kind of telling him how little his crew was going to be, and he said, the one thing I have to have is an espresso machine on the camera truck. And I was like, you can have an espresso machine, but there's no camera truck. Yes. But I will say wasn't quite a Bleeding House baby, because it wasn't a baby conceived on that set, but we did have a Bleeding House marriage, which has in the last 3 years led to a Bleeding House baby. So Nicola, the gaffer, and Grip, and like second AC, ended up marrying Gillian, our sound mixer. And neither of us were invited to the wedding, strangely enough.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's some bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay, Will, what here at the beginning of 2026 lurks in your queue?
I just started rereading a collection of poetry that I read in college. There is a new translation of The Flowers of Evil by Charles Baudelaire, and it is fabulous and sort of dark, sexy, angry reaction to the capitalization of Paris in the 19th century, and the Haussmann kind of redesign of that city. Highly recommend. Several of the poems in it were banned at the time, and they're still pretty shocking in a kind of fun 19th century French way. And I just started watching The Day of the Jackal with Eddie Redmayne.
Oh, the new one, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Like, I was a little bit kind of like harumph about it, just because, it is on Netflix.
Okay.
Sorry, it's not Tubi, but
I'm not
terrific.
It's not on Tubi.
Yeah. And what lurks in your queue, Philip?
I started watching on the Criterion Collection, not Tubi. They have a Nordic noir series of films, so like films from Sweden and Norway in like the late 40s, early 50s that are sort of noirish crime thrillers. I just started watching one called The Girl with the Hyacinths, I think it's called, and I'm only like 25 minutes into it, but it's awesome. It's really like, I was expecting them to be fun and interesting, but it's really good. It's more Coen-y than I expected it to be in a certain strange way. Anyway, it's very good. So I'm going to watch more of those, and hopefully we'll have more recommendations.
Nice.
Okay, let me do some plugs. Our series, First Run Horror, which is interviews with horror writers, is now releasing part 3 episodes on YouTube, starting with Stephen Graham Jones, author of The Buffalo Hunter, and Paul Tremblay, author of Horror Movie, both great novels. More authors will be dropping soon there on YouTube. All part 1 and 2 episodes are free to stream now. Soon in February, our new show, Art Show with Captain Skinner, will be available on our Substack and then YouTube as well. Did you know that we have a merch store? It features designs inspired by First Round Horror, plus ETCH logo gear. support us, support indie horror, support indie art, and look very cool doing it by visiting etch-shop.fourthwall.com. As always, thank you to our subscribers. Thank you to everybody who listens. Thank you, Lacey, for producing this podcast for us. Join us at etchstudio.substack.com or on our YouTube page or various social media sites, and we will be back again soon.
If you've made it this far, welcome to the shadows. Keep the stories alive by following us on social media channels at EtchFilm. Want even more chaos and behind-the-scenes strangeness? Subscribe to our Substack at etchstudio.substack.com. A special thanks to our Substack subscribers. Your support doesn't just keep the lights on, it fuels this podcast and every oddball project we conjure. You're the reason we keep telling stories that shouldn't exist, but somehow do. From all of us at Etch, thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay weird, and we'll see you in the dark.